welcome back to my channel, Hasty Books. I'm Camilla, and today I'm finally doing my January and February wrap-up. It's been a while. I've been busy, I've been doing other videos, so I thought about halfway through February, I was like, I think I'll just wait till March to do the January wrap-up, and so I'll do it together. In those 2 months, I read 15 books. I'm very pleased with that. It wasn't very consistent, so I read 10 in January and 5 in February. January was a month where I was trying to read a lot, and at the end of January, as you may know if you've been following my channel, I started my PhD part-time, and I'm working now part-time, but still quite a lot to try to find a balance between all of that, and between booktube and running and seeing friends and spending time with my husband. So I want to do too many things. But anyway, I still found time in February to read, but I've been trying to be more kind to myself, more relaxed, and just putting less pressure on myself. And I think that's really been working. I'm really pleased with how I've been reading and how I've been feeling about reading, basically. I think joining BookTube, I think for me it added a bit of pressure in terms of how much I was reading, and I was trying to utilize my time as best as I could. But in February, I was just like, oh look, I read this one book. And I think I'm rediscovering reading like a physical book, and slowly and really kind of enjoying it and diving into it. So yeah, I'm really pleased with that. And I hope that I continue that way. March has started a bit more kind of active already, but we shall see in that wrap up. So for this wrap up, I thought I would do things a bit differently. Usually I do a wrap up in order of books that I've read. Not that it's something that obviously viewers would know, that that's potentially how I read things, but I thought that the way I would do it now would be from the books I least enjoyed to the most enjoyed. So obviously you can skip ahead. The books I enjoyed the most will be at the end of this video. So stick around if you want to watch this whole video. I thought about doing some stats as well, but I'm going to be doing a quarterly stats kind of review of all of my goals, far too many goals, but I'm going to do a quarterly, so probably at some point in April, I'm going to review Q1 of 2023 and see how my reading's been going. So yeah, so no stats up to now. So let's dive right into my reviews. And the book I least enjoyed in those 2 months, and I think I read it in February, was How Not to Marry a Duke by Felicia Kingsley. Why did I read this book, you ask? Well, this was a NetGalley ARC that I got many years ago. I think this came out in 2017. Clearly there'd been an issue with the file, or by the time that I went online to download it, it had been archived. I don't know what happened, but basically I'd never had access to it. Found it finally, decided to just listen to the audiobook quickly. It wasn't very good. It's a rom-com. It's full of cliches, like the girl from the wrong side of the track and the guy who's really posh, and how they come to middle ground, whatever. Anyway, the chemistry wasn't even that good, the writing wasn't that great, so not a big recommendation for me. If you love the genre, maybe you can look it up, but it's not a recommendation for me. So let's swiftly move on to the next one. So from now on, I just want to add a caveat that my reviews aren't on a full kind of scale like that. So obviously How Not to Marry a Duke was definitely at the bad end for me. Did not really like it. But from now I think we're jumping to like the middle, because these next books aren't bad. It's just books that I didn't really connect with, or maybe they weren't for an audience that included me. Or it's just they aren't bad books, but they happen to just be at this end of the list. So the book next that I'm going to talk about is Winter Recipes from the Collective by Louise Gluck. She won the Nobel Prize for Literature, and obviously I have a goal of reading a book from all the women who've won. So I found this one. It's a poetry collection. It's quite short. I kind of just read through it. It's good poetry, but there's something I just didn't connect with, just didn't relate to it. So yeah, so there was just more of a me thing than a book than about it. So I think it's something to try if you want to. But yeah, it just wasn't totally for me. I didn't always get it. Next is I Spy, a Bletchley Park mystery by Ryan Tracy. This is another NetGalley ARC that I requested on a bit of a whim. I really liked the cover. It looked like a nice kind of middle grade YA mystery. I really love learning about Bletchley Park and about, women who were included there and what they did and everything. This was it was a bit younger than I expected, so I didn't again, I don't think I'm the audience for that. And I don't love reading children characters, especially when it's aimed at children. So yeah, I don't think I connected with it as much. And I think sometimes the writing and the chapters were a bit disjointed for me. But generally, I thought it was kind of interesting. And at the end, I did want to carry on. I was like, oh, is there going to be another book? So I mean, that's kind of a good sign anyway. Next, oh, people are going to come at me for this. But anyway, next is Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Actually, I kind of worked really hard not to put it at the end of the list because I really didn't enjoy it that much. So I will try to keep my thoughts concise. I don't think that I enjoyed Charles Dickens's writing that much. To me, the beginning was super pantomime-y. And obviously I was just like, oh, I should have known. I read A Christmas Carol. But I don't know why I thought that that would be different. I see that in Great Expectation, obviously the world building is so much larger and it becomes less pantomime and more like about the character's growth and everything. But I still couldn't help but feel like that kind of writing just wasn't for me. I might give Charles Dickens another try with a different book. Please recommend another one that you might think, you know, I like. I don't know. I just don't know. I'm trying not to put pressure on myself to read books that I don't really want to read, and I feel like I didn't know if Charles Dickens was gonna be for me, and now like I'm even less sure basically. But yeah, the writing was just very like, it felt like almost like Penny Dreadfuls, like something like very like about entertainment and about like that feeling that maybe if I was Victorian I would have liked. But then I've read other Victorian novels and they don't have that essence at all. So that's why I think maybe that's just not for me. So that's why. So maybe on hearing my thoughts, maybe you have a book from Charles Dickens that you think maybe Camille will like that. Or maybe you'll be like, that's just Charles Dickens writing. Maybe I should give up on it. Let me know your thoughts. And let's move on quickly. All right, next we have Le Grand Cahier by Agatha Christophe. This was my one French book that I read in January. What to say about this book? So my parents sent me this. It's part of a trilogy. And I'm not gonna lie, I started reading this and I was like, what the hell is this? It is a weird, like super weird. Like there are a lot of things that happen and I don't want to say to them, but also I feel like there should be a trigger warning. Anyway, there's like bestiality, there's like rape, there's like incest, there's like everything in here. It's weird ass, okay? And it's based, I mean, the author is Hungarian. So I'm assuming that it's meant to be based in Hungary after the Second World War. But everything is described as really kind of vague. So it's the big city, the other country, the bad people, the good people, you know. Nothing is clear, but that's what you can kind of get from, you know, the context. So these twins are left at their grandmother's house during the war, and they kind of just try to cope with living the war, with not having money, with having to search for food and all of that stuff. And the violence and everything that's happening. Oh yeah, sexual abuse for children. Yes, that's another trigger warning. This book is literally so short and has all of it in it. All of it. Anyway, I'm not gonna lie, throughout all this book I was like, why the hell did my parents give me this book to read? It's weird. And then literally in the last page I was like, wow, I cannot wait to know what happens next. So yeah, I have mixed feelings about this book. I kind of hated it. It's written really part down as well, so obviously it's a translation, but I don't think it's that well written. But it's a lot packed into a very little writing, so it still feels like the author did a good job in that way to pack so much. But yeah, I definitely will keep reading, I think, because I want to know what happens next. And if it's a trilogy of short books, you know, why not? But it's weird. So I think all of the trigger warnings and the weirdness is just content warning for all of you who might be tempted to just look this up. Next, I read Wild Ambers by Nikita Gill. This is another poetry collection. I literally have not read this much poetry ever. So this is a short poetry collection. It's mostly about, so the tagline is Poems of Rebellion, Fire and Beauty. There's a lot about basically your body, about growing up, about learning who you are, and then there's a lot of retellings of kind of classic fairy tales and stuff like that, and mythology as well. I thought it was nice. I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was very modern, very millennial. I feel sometimes it was a little bit too like Instagram poem kind of situation. But I enjoyed it and I would read something else by Nikita Gill. Next we have Beach Read by Emily Henry. It was a lovely romance. I actually really enjoyed it. It's a woman who basically after her father died, she realized that he'd been unfaithful to her mother, and he has this house and she goes there and she's also a writer and she's trying to write a book basically and get something done, but she's trying to also branch out in a different style. Oh my god, look at that, next door a hot other writer is living and she knows him because she used to go to university with him. And what? Oh yeah, he used to have a crush on her. The coincidences, you know. But I really enjoyed the experience. I quite enjoy Henry's writing actually. I'd really like Book Lovers, and I think I prefer Book Lovers still, but I don't know if it's just because I read it first and I kind of enjoyed that more. Next we have Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead by Emily R. Austin. This is a short novel that I found on my library app and I just decided to read it, and it was really good and it kind of is dark and funny and so relatable. The main character seems to have an obsession and an anxiety about death, and as someone who has a lot of anxiety about death and illness and well, anxiety about everything really, but there's a lot of things, to be fair, it kind of sometimes made me feel good, which is maybe gonna sound super bad, but sometimes like her thoughts went so far and so fast that I was like, wow, I guess I'm not that bad, as in my thoughts don't go that far usually. Or, you know, I try to kind of logic things out because I know I have this anxiety. So I was just like, okay, I could be kind of more anxious and more depressed and more kind of inhabited by all of that. But at the same time, like the way that Austen wrote was so relatable, and the observation that the character makes are really, sometimes really funny. And I just really enjoyed it. I just enjoyed this lesbian character who pretends not to be gay to work for a church, where she ends up just randomly, you know, walking in looking for like a group help, whatever. And then she becomes like the secretary, and then she makes a website for them, and then she's like, oh my god, so great. And she becomes involved in this whole like murder mystery. It is an absurd book, but it's really short and I think it packs a punch. And it's one that I would really recommend, especially if those are potentially subject that you might be interested in. Next we have The Seven Moons of Mali Almeida by Shian Karunatilaka from Sri Lanka. He won the Booker Prize last year in 2022. I remember when the long list was announced, that was a book that first the cover really kind of really was striking, and also the general gist of the book and the summary was really intriguing. And I think there was a lot of it about the character being queer and being a kind of war journalist photographer, and being obviously based in Sri Lanka during the war or the civil unrest. I forget the exact detail, but I thought everything about it just sounded so weird. And he's basically, the book starts when and he's dead, and he has 7 moons, so kind of 7 days, to figure out what happened, potentially like see just I guess where things were left off in his life. And he tries to save people's life. He tried to get his photos, you know, and figure out who killed him. Because he photographed so many horrible things that happened in his country, he was like, oh my gosh, I guess anyone could have killed me, I don't know. But he was also a gambler. Like, there was a lot of layers to this book and to this character. That said, I have to say, when I actually got to reading it, it just didn't strike a chord as much as I thought it would. And maybe it's because I've been hyping it for 6 months. I think it didn't help that the main character is just not that likable. And sometimes the plot felt very all over the place. And obviously it's because we're with the character alive, and then we're kind of with the ghosts and with the, you know, Mali Almeida, who's dead, but he's trying to influence the world. Like, it felt disjointed at times, which I'm sure that's the point. But I don't know, there's something about it that didn't connect with me 100%. And that's why it's not higher on my list. So I think it was good, but I don't think that it was great. I definitely think that I prefer The Trees from the short list of the book. Next we have this tiny book. It's Misfits, A Personal Manifesto by Michaela Cole. This is a transcription of the MacTaggart lecture that she gave at a festival in Edinburgh, I think in 2018 or 19. And it was just so powerful. I just really, really enjoyed it. I think I read it in like one sitting. And I think I will be reading it again. And I think it's kind of trying to push the boundaries of television and in fiction, and what are we doing and what she's doing and what she lived through. And I think it was just really, really beautiful. And also it's making me want to watch more of her TV as well, which I always meant to do, but now definitely more. Next, I'm following that up with another nonfiction, which was In Order to Live by Yeonmi Park. This is the story of Park. She grew up in North Korea, and this how, well, her life growing up there, how she escaped into China, and then into Mongolia, and then out to South Korea. And it was honestly so good. It was really interesting to learn more about North Korea just generally, because I feel like we don't really know that much about it, but also about like her personal experience, especially going out, obviously about like people trafficking and like so many things, that you don't think about. And like I'm aware of so many bad things that happen in the world, but to see like someone's actual story being, written like that and discussed, and she's clearly, at the end of the book, she mentions how she has to have written this book and go through the painful experiences because it's almost as a reaction or trauma mechanism. She tried to forget all of that, and she was just like, oh no, it wasn't that bad. And so she kind of goes back and finally tells her story and what happened to her. And it's harrowing and it's so interesting. Someone in one of my comments mentioned how she's kind of turned into the alt-right now or something weird. And I've definitely been seeing that, and that kind of taints it a little bit for me. But I tried to kind of put that aside and just focus on her story in this book, and I thought it was beautiful. Obviously, I'm not sure how much of the book she actually wrote herself, so I don't want to comment on the writing, but obviously it's incredible to learn about her journey. Next is another poetry book. It's Here by Wisława Szymborska. This is another Nobel Prize winner. So she is from Poland, and she also won. So I read Here. This is the one that I found, and it was so good. I think that's why Louise Glock's collection was so low, is that I loved Szymborska's poetry collection. I thought it was so beautifully done. Obviously it's translation, but I thought it was accessible. You could see, visualize, understand. Like there was just so many beautiful things that she was doing with her poetry, and the different themes and subjects that she took. So 100% recommend it, and it's really short, so yeah, a really quick read, and it's really, really good. So in the penultimate position is Becky Chambers. So I read a Psalm for the Wild Built and A Prayer for the Crowned Shy, one after the other, just back to back. I was like, boom, boom. I really enjoyed it. Oh my goodness. I just forgot how much I love Chambers' writing and the themes of found family and just, belonging and diversity, and I just love it all. And I thought these were short and sweet and lovely to read. And I love the idea of like bringing the robots and what do they want and what the humans want. And I loved it. I cannot wait for a third one. I hope there's a third one. I've been kind of worried recently because someone said it was a duology, and I was just like, what? It can't just have ended there. But I guess there's only 2 books out right now. But I'm hoping there'll be a third one because I really, really enjoyed it. And finally, in top position of January and February, I think my favorite read was Babel, An Arcane History by R.F. Kuang. So I'm actually quite surprised how much I love this, and that it's basically first on my list of books that I loved. So I requested it on my library app like months ago, and it took many months for me to get it. I requested, and it looked very much like, the only thing I knew about it is that it looked sort of like a YA fantasy, also a little bit of dark academia. I didn't have high hopes for that. But this book is incredible. I loved it because it literally deals with so much, and I'm astounded by R.F. Kuang. Honestly, incredible. Like, this book obviously is very much like a kind of coming of age story about a boy who grows up, I think it's in China. Well, it doesn't grow up in China. He's from China. He gets taken by this mystery white man, and he gets taken to England because he has, because he's smart, blah, blah, blah. Then he gets taught lots of things, and then he goes off to Oxford. And he kind of goes into the language, whatever, school in the Babel Tower. and becomes part of this kind of magical thing where they keep these language brick powers. Difficult to explain, and it's basically 2 months ago now since I read it, but anyway, it felt all very kind of like mystery, fantasy, and I didn't know how I was going to deal with that. But then it's so much about colonialism. Like, amazingly, the things, you know, the metaphor that she brings in with this random magical thing. And I loved it. I loved it. And by the end, I was heartbroken and I was just completely in. And I was just, oh, I don't know how to tell you, but this is kind of a vibe. I loved it. Don't let it scare you if you're not too much into fantasy, because it's not that much. Like, there's just a little bit of a magical element. It almost feels to me a little bit like a magical realism, because it's clearly based in like a normal world that we know. It's like Oxford, it's England, it's India, whatever. It's boats because it's based in like the 1800s or whatever. But oh my goodness, there's so many layers to this. And I think the whole aspect on colonialism, on, you know, brain drain, on taking power and fueling wars in those countries, just everything incredible. The way she knitted is not the word, brought that in to the plot. And yeah, it was just beautiful. The way it ended also beautiful, and incredible. So yeah, so obviously that's how I had to end with this book, because that's the one that gave me the most feels this, in the last 2 months. But this video has probably been far too long, so I will leave it there. Please leave your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know if you've read any of these books, if you agree or disagree with me. I would always appreciate your thoughts. As always, thank you so much for watching, and hey, see you back. Bye!